Loading, preparing, setting up. All right, you're ready.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Reverend Janet Tucker. I'm the assistant pastor at Unity Fellowship Church of Columbia, and I welcome you to this evening's Spiritual Development, our Bible study. We will be studying the lesson of Luke, the 23rd chapter, verses 33 to 43. Our title for today will be In the Middle. So we start out going verse by verse. Luke 23:33 says, and this is coming from the Inclusive Bible, when they had reached the place called the Skull, they crucified Jesus there, together with the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. And what you see here is a picture of one of the places where they feel that this hill where Jesus was baptized, crucified, looks like. And like I was describing on Sunday, you kind of see like the two little eyes. It's like one eye here and one eye here. And so they call this the skull, which is what they say this place is called, the skull. And I told you we would talk about today about this skull. The skull is described, it's termed in three different languages. In Hebrew, it's Golgotha. In Greek, it's cranium. And in Latin, it's Calvary. And so this skull, like I discussed on Sunday, symbolizes to some, like when I first saw skulls personally, I always thought of them as signs of death. I mean, that's the way I always looked at a skull. Because I used to ask the teenagers, well, why do you wear skulls all the time? And I could never get like a clear answer as to why they wore them. Because like I said, I grew up, skull was sign of death. But then when I did my little research for this lesson, I found out that it can be a sign of wisdom, a sign of strength. It represents victory. Remember when I finished Sunday, I said victory was ours. And so here we have a hill, the place where Jesus was crucified, called the skull. This is the place of victory. Victory because Jesus went to this place knowing that he would not leave this place the way he came, but yet he would leave it victorious. Victorious as in freeing us, victorious as in liberating us, victorious as in relieving the oppressed. As we go further into this lesson, you'll see some other ways that we'll see victory. Luke 23:34 to 37. And Jesus said, Abba, forgive them. They don't know what they are doing. Then they divided his garments, rolling dice for them. The people stood there watching. The rulers, however, jeered him and said, he saved others. Let him save himself. If he is really the Messiah of God, the chosen one. The soldiers also mocked him. They served Jesus sour wine and said, if you are really the King of the Jews, save yourself. The question I have for you is, why do you think there are two types of people basically talking here? And what are those types?
My guess is, for one, they wanted to see if Jesus really the Messiah if that he say he is, and if he could actually save others, then let's see if he can save himself. And if he is, then they I guess maybe be sorry and repentful.
Okay. Well, when you said it, the people, what type of people do you think they were? Now it says here the rulers jeered him.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. The people
Okay.
that did all that bad stuff to him.
So who do the rulers represent?
The people in power.
I guess it would be the
People in power. Yes. Go ahead, Brother Lee.
No, yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
The people in power, Deacon Lynn said. It represents the government, politics, the politicians. Because remember, you had the kings and then you had the other governors and stuff like that. But then the soldiers also mocked him. And the soldiers, they were the ones who were fighting. They were the ones who were out here who could save a country. If you think of how our soldiers are out here. And so they are representative of the people, but they're also representative of the government. Anything else you saw here? And when we talk about this garment, if you look in the book of John, the 19th chapter, 23 to 24, this garment that it says they divided his garments here is only one garment in the book of John. Does somebody have it and they can read it for us? John 19, 23 to 24.
I'll read it.
Okay.
My print is pretty small. All right.
Okay.
John 19, 23 to 24, and I'm reading from the New Revised Standard Version.
Okay.
When the soldiers had crucified Jesus, they took his clothes and divided them into 4 parts, one for each soldier. They also took his tunic. Now the tunic was seamless, woven in one piece from the top. So they said to one another, "Let us not tear it, but cast lots for it to see who will get it." This was to fulfill what the scripture says. They divided my clothes among themselves, and for my clothing they cast lots.
Okay. So here we're talking about, if you remember what they wore then, usually they wore like this, as they said, tunic, which is like a one long shirt. It goes down usually below the knees or whatever. So you're talking about really one garment. Now they may have had, I guess, like whatever he used, sackcloth or whatever to cover his privates or whatever that is, but, and then sandals, because, you know, usually he had sandals if he wasn't barefoot. And so there wasn't much to divide, but there was one garment. And that one garment represented our one God. Our one God. God is all encompassing. God covers everybody. There's no really division to be made. Now, it was customary for them to be out here doing this. This is what they did with people's clothes when people were being crucified. This is what they did. So it was not out of, you know, it's not something that's willy-nilly they decided to make up because here Jesus was up on the cross. But this was something that they did. And so they didn't want to, I would say, treat them any different, but yet they did. because there was no seam to tear. You know, things are easier to tear when they have a seam because you can tear them at the seam versus you have one big shirt with no seam in it. Most time you had to go get a pair of scissors or something, or a knife or something like that in order to tear and divide this garment. But you can't do that when there's that one, because notice it says you are the chosen one. So there's a lot going on with the scripture. As we move to the next verse, it says, there was an inscription above Jesus that read, "This is the King of the Jews." Now, what you see here in this inscription, you see three different languages. You see the Hebrew, you see the Italian, and you see the Greek. Now, why do you think all three are here? And they say the same thing. I know this is Latin. I can read that one, but the other ones I can't read. Jesus of Nazareth, King of Judea. That's what this one says, King of the Jews, basically. And so these are probably saying the same thing, but why do you think they wanted to have all three?
Because all three were represented.
All three were represented. Okay, represented, what you mean?
In the crowd.
In the crowd, okay,
So that everybody could understand.
okay. Anyone else? I'm not saying you're wrong, I'm just asking, making sure everybody has a chance to have their say.
That's what I was thinking, like, as far as maybe the people that they were being addressed earlier could be, like Sharon was saying, people in the crowd. The language was relating to everyone in the crowd.
Okay. Through my research, what I found was that here we had Jesus, King of the Jews, but he was really King of all religion. Greek was the language of the culture and the knowledge. Latin was the language of the law and the government. Jesus was king there too. And then Hebrew was the language of the revealed religion. So therefore, Jesus wore the crown of all three. All three being one in one person. Here we are back talking about that one. We had the one tunic. We have the one person representative of all three. They represent the entire world, all of mankind. Just like you all were saying, they represented everyone that was there, everyone that wasn't there. They were all represented in this inscription, done in all three languages. Verses 39 to 41. One of the criminals who hung there beside him insulted Jesus too, saying, "Are you really the Messiah? Then save yourself and us." But the other answered the first with a rebuke. "Don't you even fear God? We are only paying the price for what we have done. But this one has done nothing wrong." Now, why do you think that this first criminal became just like the soldiers, mocking Jesus, saying, are you really the Messiah to save yourself and us? What do you think? What was going on here?
He wanted to get off the cross.
He wanted to get off the cross.
And if you're supposed to be the man, then why you ain't doing it?
Okay, that's fair. I like that. Anyone else?
Seeing is believing.
Seeing is believing. All right. I love that, Brother Lee. Seeing is believing.
I know for me, I want to see stuff happen so I can like I say, like if I don't know, like if I want something so bad, I pray to God like, hey God, can you do this? And if you do it, then I'm like, okay. Then that just give me confirmation, like, okay, you are real. I
Oh,
mean, I'm still
okay.
struggling in my faith, so but I'm just being real.
Hey, but Brother Lee, it's a lot of people feel that way. The thing is, this man's mindset, here you are, you ready to leave this earth. If there is somebody that can save you, and they say this is the one, I would,
Get to it.
hey, I'm like, get to it, let's do it. I mean, for real, I mean, he probably was scared. He probably was sweating bullets and everything. You know, they got me up here and nailed to this cross. I got all the stuff on my back bleeding where they done tore it up on this wood that's behind me. If this man can get us down here, then hey, I'm for it. Now, he never said that I'm guilty. He never said that. He never said I deserve this. All he said was I want to get down. No, he didn't say those words exactly, but in actuality, that's what he was saying. Save yourself and us. That's what he said. So, you know, he's like, hey, I want to get down. And if you can do it, then hey, I know you're going to free all of us because, you know, no telling what he's already heard. You know, this the man been walking through town healing people. This the man been walking through town telling people to get up. He's been delivering people. Deliver me. So I can imagine what he was feeling. This is my one chance. But then you got this dude on the other side talking about, don't you fear God? I fear God and death right now. I can imagine that conversation if they actually said those words. And so out of fear, I'm going to ask, if you can do it, do it. Do it now. Not out of mocking, but out of desperation. And so he said, don't you even fear God? Don't you even reverence God? I would say that in his own little way, but it was as if he was more concerned with freeing himself than allowing things to happen, and who knows what would have happened. And so it was like he was putting his 2 cents in. You know, we have that tendency sometimes to even put our 2 cents in and not allowing God to do what God needs to do in order to get us free from our situations, free from being oppressed, free from racism, free from sexism, free from all those things that we experience being marginalized people. And so that's why we have Jesus right there in the middle with these 2 different ideas and thoughts, processes going on both sides of him. One who is saying, hey, I'm guilty and I paid the price for what I did. He's like, you know, really forgive me. The other just want to be freed. I don't need to be forgiven, just free me. And so you got these 2 things going on. And so Jesus is right here in the middle, making that ultimate decision. And so verse 42 and 43 says, and we're still talking about the other criminal. Jesus, remember me when you come into your glory. And Jesus replied, the truth is, today you'll be with me in paradise. In other words, today you heard my call. When I said, follow me, you said yes. And today, this person has said, they accepted in a way, says, remember me when you come into your glory, because I've asked for forgiveness. And so a place where love is so powerful that forgiveness is offered to all. The ultimate thing, paradise. And so paradise, it's there. It's there for you, your co-workers, your family, your friends, your neighbors. Spider-Man, that's who needs it. It's there. And so how far God is willing to go to free the oppressed is illustrated by Jesus being right there in the middle on this cross. Because today, as this says, Jesus says, you will be with me in paradise. Today, Jesus stands with us as we fight for racism, classism, homophobia, hunger, discrimination, homelessness, poverty. All the systems of injustice are made just. The powers and principalities, the governments, the politicians, they're overturned so that this world can be rid of the uproar, the violence, the things that don't allow paradise to be paradise. A place where there's peace, a place where there's tranquility, a place where you don't have to worry about somebody saving you because we all just feel at home, because we are in paradise. We're at peace. We're at peace with ourselves because these things that have kept us marginalized no longer exist. What say you? Everybody quiet.
Oh, are you asking us what we have to say about it?
Yes. Yes.
I think it's good that you've chosen the middle for this, because to me, as I was looking at it, this is a very important scene in our belief in our Christianity and what Jesus represents to us. And in the middle of all of this that's going on, you have religious leaders and government leaders, and like you said, the soldiers who still didn't get it. And even as they were speaking, they were affirming, they didn't know it, but they were affirming that Jesus was king.
Yes.
And they didn't realize it. And I don't believe that, in the middle of this, that there weren't some people out there who began to understand it. Even as they were mocking Jesus, they were in the middle of the crowd, in the middle of this whole situation, and they start to believe, it's like, oh, this really is the king. And though they were mocking, it didn't turn out the way they would expect, or to their understanding. And with Jesus being in the middle of the two guys, like you said, there's the one whose ego is in the way. So he's like, look, get me down from here. Let's do this. And we don't know how exactly how he was saying it, like if it were a begging or if it were, it says when he was deriding him. So I'm assuming that he was mocking like everybody else was. But so to me, it was his ego was in the way. He couldn't see that he was in the presence of greatness, in the presence of royalty. But the other thief, he saw it. He saw it and he was repentant. He didn't actually ask for forgiveness, but it was in his spirit, and you could see his understanding of who he was nailed next to. And he knew that this was royalty. He knew that this was truly the Son of God, and that he could indeed answer his prayer. And his prayer was not to get down off of the cross, because he was willing to go ahead and pay the price. The wages of sin is death. He was willing to go ahead and take that. But he's like, okay, after that though, which also told me that he believed in life after death. There was, just like nowadays, there's people who believed and people who didn't. There's the arguments between the Sadducees and the Pharisees, whether or not there was a resurrection and life after death and all of that. There's the same thing as on this cross. The one thief, all he could think about is the now, the here and the now, not knowing that right next to him is someone who could present to them a hereafter that is more brilliant than the now that he has. But then the other thief, he understood and he said, please remember me when you come into your kingdom. And Jesus said to him, you got it. I see your heart. People will look at what you've done, that you're hanging here on the cross, and think that you are a terrible person. But I can see past all of that, and I can see your heart, and I see that you understand the situation that you're in, and that there's a better way. Even though you're on the cross and some might see this as the end of your life, you have an understanding that you are in my presence. So Jesus sees this, and he tells them that you will be with me in paradise. And I was actually looking up for paradise, because a lot of times we kind of think of that he's saying heaven, but there was a word for heaven. If you wanted to say heaven, he could have said heaven, but he said paradise. And we kind of get hung up on whether or not he was going to be with Jesus in paradise on that day, or if it was another day, because when they had the original scripture, the original writings, they didn't have punctuation. So the translators stuck punctuation in where they thought it would be, or thought it should be. So that kind of puts us in the place of trying to figure out exactly what it would have been. So we can't say that, he was going to be with him on that day. For one thing, Jesus wasn't in paradise on that day, because he was in the tomb until the third day. And then even after that, he said to Mary that I have not ascended to the Father yet. So he wasn't really saying, as soon as we break from here, we go on to paradise, we're going to heaven rather. He could have been in the place of paradise, because he's no longer on the cross and suffering. So he could have been, yes, in a place where he's asleep. As Jesus would say, whenever there was someone who's dead, he said, don't worry, they're just asleep. So that would have been a form of paradise. But to me, the whole thing is that in the middle of all of this, Jesus never surrendered his authority. He never surrendered his purpose for being there. In the middle of it all, he forgave those who were chastising him and who were mocking him. In the middle of it, he still proclaimed himself to be king in his action. He didn't have to say it. Like they say, cream don't tell you that it's cream, it just rises to the top.
Yep.
So in the middle of all that they were saying, Jesus still was fulfilling his purpose, no matter what else was going on.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sharon. Excellent. Excellent. Anyone else? Nope. No one else? I thought I saw Cole open. You have anything, Minister Cole?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
I don't have anything.
Okay. All righty. Well, if no one else has anything to add, and we'll go to Pastor. You're on mute, Pastor. I know you had your glasses off. You didn't see.
That is true. That is true. That is true. Good lesson and good discussion. I appreciate the way in which you took a close look at the language and the history and that which was related to the culture and context of the story, right? And explored a little deeper about what Luke may have intended, even compared it to the other Gospels and how they, at least John's depiction of this story differs a little bit. And the importance of taking the multiple accounts of the same story to not only try to put the pieces together, which is what we often do, but also to see the distinctions so that we can understand and ascertain some of the differences in what the writers intended when they wrote and conveyed their stories. They wrote or they told their stories. So I thought that that was very good. And I thank everyone for your participation and your explanations. I'd like to explore the applicability now that we have the context, now that we have the culture, now that we have content. I'd like to explore how this either exemplifies for us some message, some ideas, some concepts that we can take with us, or how it conveys the good news, which is the intent of the gospel, right? So the gospel is written so that we are able to share the good news that we also extract from these stories. So where is the good news for us today? I raise that question for all of you. Where's the good news in this?
So I'll add for me,
Mhm.
and how I, even from Sunday, walked away
Mhm.
with the words, the last, part of the last words that Jesus was saying, forgive them,
Mhm.
for they know not what they do. And I thought I heard you mention it too as well, Rev, tonight about, even even through all of what's going on, at the end of the day, we arrive at forgiveness.
Mhm.
And I just thought that it was the ultimate example for me. And today, looking at this text, how it's like, yeah, man, shucks, all the way to the cross.
Mhm.
Okay. That Jesus is like the wild card here, is that liberation for you, for me, as I was looking at it for myself, because I'm always being, reminded of, I think it came from actually the seed been dropped with Deacon Lynn on Monday for meditation, but like, as far as like the idea of forgiveness, right? And forgiveness being, the secret to where how you could release so much bondage and so much heartache and resentment, and the fact that, like, that could shift you from a moment to moment if you can make that decision. And sometimes we can get caught up in like, yeah, this stuff hurt us. Did we go through some really tough, crap, whether, around this time of the year, it could be with our family, it could be with anything. And at the end of the day, it's like, man, Jesus modeled the ultimate, right there on the cross. The man is still exhibiting the principle of forgiveness.
Yeah.
And I just thought that it was just a good reminder for me in this text of that, and that how Christ been the ultimate example of,
if you say you believe in the teachings of Jesus, like, come on,
Mhm.
man, like all the way down to the wire, this man is on the cross, yet he's still praying for forgiveness. So I just thought that was an ultimate lesson for me to look at that and how, I can apply it to my life.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you. So there is Jesus as an example of one who forgives. And I also see and heard in your expression that Jesus also teaches us that we are forgiven, right? So in that moment, Jesus exemplifies the forgiveness that he teaches about.
Yeah.
And he also lets us know that we are forgiven. Because we are completely forgivable no
Mhm.
matter what we have done,
Mhm.
no matter who we are, no matter where we have been. Even in our deepest convictions, whether we are guilty or not, we are completely forgivable. And we are forgiven. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that, Minister.
And as followers, we have to learn to forgive too, unconditionally.
Yes.
And
And
it can be
absolutely.
difficult, but if we're following, it can be done.
Right. Jesus exemplifies that, right?
Yep.
And we often say, but he was Jesus. But this example of Jesus dying on the cross also demonstrates that Luke wants us to see that Jesus was human,
Yep.
right? So we can empathize with a human being who is suffering and is still able to forgive.
Mhm. Yeah, that's rich.
Yeah.
And then if you remember that no matter what situation you're in, be it good, bad, or anywhere in between,
Mhm.
Jesus is in the middle.
Yeah.
Go to the middle, get your strength, change your attitude, and do what needs to be done.
Mm. That's good, right? That's good. So thank you for taking us to that topic, right? That Reverend Janet poses for us. Because I am hearing in what you're saying, Deacon Lynn, that middle place is a neutral ground, right?
Yes.
Yep.
Is a neutral ground. So, I'm a professional mediator, and often it's very helpful to find that place where you can find a more neutral perspective of that which is going on, right? So the middle is that neutral ground. So I hear you say, when we get to those situations where it may be challenging, difficult, almost impossible to forgive, we can find a neutral place. We can find a middle place. We can find another perspective.
Yes.
And there, God is with us,
Mhm.
helping us navigate that middle place.
Yeah.
To ultimately bring us to the victory. That's good stuff.
Mhm.
That's good.
So where's the good news? The good news is everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
All you have to do is just keep your eyes focused
Mm-hmm.
on what you're supposed to be doing and let God do the rest.
Yeah.
Nothing but good news.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Because the thing about it, when I was reading up on the scripture, is that a lot of time they were talking about doing these crucifixions, like sometimes they'd be a long time
Sure.
before their death, but Jesus died in 6 hours.
Sure.
6 hours.
Sure.
So that right there is beyond the expectations, our other thing. But the thing was, he didn't have to go through all that agony and pain for as long as they expected him to have to go through it.
Mm,
And then the fact that he then got up.
mm,
That is just awesome.
yeah.
Awesome.
All those 6 hours is a long time to suffer.
Yeah,
It's a long
but
time to be
I mean,
tortured.
imagine
That's a long
suffering
time to be
longer
tortured.
than that, though.
Yeah.
Because they were saying, because they were nailed to the cross, a lot of times because they had to breathe and you had to lift your chest, it would eventually cause asphyxiation. And so, the fact that they were just there and trying to just stay alive for as long as they could. And so people sometimes would be there 14, 15, 16 hours before they actually died. And here Jesus was, and it was only 6 hours. I was like, wow.
To me, that sounds like that he made that choice.
Yeah. I mean, hey,
He-
sometimes, you hear some of the old people say, I'd rather go quick than, have to suffer
That's right.
for a long time.
That's right.
well, I don't look at it as the suffering so much as, like he said at the end, it is finished. He had accomplished what he was supposed to do.
Yep.
And at that time, it was over. So what would be the point of hanging there longer?
Hey, but this is what the people expected, though.
Right.
Because they didn't see him as the Messiah, as this special one, as this chosen one. They saw him as equal to those criminals.
And they didn't expect all of the other stuff that happened after that too.
Exactly. So they got a rude awakening. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like the way you pulled that in, Minister Cole, with the forgiveness. That I hadn't looked at that like that. That was very helpful.
You're welcome.
Awesome. Any other final words before we close out tonight?
Good lesson.
Yep.
It is a good lesson. It is a good lesson. I want to also encourage us. This is the lectionaries passages for Christ the King, right? Sunday to acknowledge, right, the victory of Jesus and acknowledge the elevation of Christ, right? That Christ's Spirit, the anointed one, the Messiah. This also leads us to our Advent period. So Sunday is the first Sunday of Advent, and Advent then for the next 4 weeks will focus on the anticipation of and then the celebration of Jesus.
Little baby Jesus.
Right? Yes, who we celebrate, right, at Christmas. And so for these next 4 weeks, I invite us to continue to think about the good news that this whole season brings, the good news that we celebrate, and think about what it means to us today in 2022 as we honor and acknowledge the birth and the life of Jesus.
All righty. And so for those that are joining us through social media, we thank you for joining us this evening. And as always, we're located at 120 Allegheny Avenue in Towson, Maryland. Our service time is 12:30 p.m. on Sundays. And you can always find us on YouTube under the Columbia Project. If you want to check out our website, see some other things that we have to offer, you can go to www.ufccolumbia.com. And as always, if you want to give, we have paypal.me /UFC Columbia. And I thank you again. And we are signing off for today. Thank you.